Hi, I'm Brett.
Hi, I'm Rachel.
Hi, I'm Audrey, and we're here to visit the Butler Art Museum.
Hello, and welcome to the Butler Institute of American Art, America's Museum. So today we're very happy to have you here, and I'm going to take you on a tour on some of the pieces of our highlights within our collection. First, I'd like to start with a painting that is of Joseph Butler Jr., our founder. Actually, the Butler Institute of American Art is fondly referred to as America's Museum because we opened our doors a little over 100 years ago, and this museum is a gift from this gentleman in this painting. This is an oil on canvas. This is Joseph Butler Jr., as I said, the founder of our museum, and his goal in life was to collect American artwork. He was actually an industrialist and a steel lover and was in the business of steel in his life, but as he collected paintings, he ran out of room in his house to store those paintings, so he had this museum, the Butler Institute of American Art, built so that he can share his wonderful collection of American art with you and all of our community and the community at large. So this painting shows him sitting at a room in his home where he has his hand on a desk, and he is looking at, if you can tell in the background, some blueprints of this museum. You see the facade at the front of the museum, and that's Joseph Butler. So we're really thrilled to have you here today, and I would just say this as well to you. The Butler Institute of American Art was the first museum in our country in 1919 to specifically house a collection of American artwork. So that's why we're called America's Museum. So let's take a look and walk through some of the galleries, and we'll feature some of the other works in our collection. So as you walk through our museum, we actually feature works from 4 different centuries in our collection. I'd like to talk now about one of the most significant works in our collection, created by an artist named Winslow Homer. This painting, oil on canvas, was created in 1872 and depicts 9 boys in the foreground playing in a schoolyard with their schoolhouse, a little red schoolhouse in the background. So if you think about back in 1872, a very long time ago, this painting was one of Joseph Butler's fondest. And he actually felt that it represented his life when he went to school in a small one-room schoolhouse out in the country, which back then, Youngstown, Ohio, was country land. So you see these children. Maybe have you ever had a chance to play in the yard or play on rollerblades or ice skates and hold on and see who breaks the chain? That's sort of representative of what these children were doing. This style of painting is called genre. You spell that G-E-N-R-E. And it actually represents a specific time, everyday life in a specific time period. Okay, let's go on to another work in our collection. Next, I'd like to take a look at this painting. And this is actually a painting with a little bit of a portrait of a woman and her children in the background. And then you see someone off in the distance waiting in a little horse and buggy cart for them that they're waving to. But this is predominantly a landscape. This work is done by an artist named Robert Vano, a lead artist in the world of American Impressionism. So if you go and look up the word Impressionism, you'll find that Impressionism, that form of art, actually started in France. And America got on board in the later 1800s, mid to 1800s, and this painting was done in, let me just check the date here to be sure, and you can always find out a lot about a work of art if you look at the signage on it. So in 1890, Robert Vano created this work of art. A few things I'd like to point out to you about this painting is the use of color. Take a look at the color and the light in this painting as opposed to the portrait of Joseph Butler that we looked at earlier. You see lots of light, lots of color. Impressionistic artists, those were the 2 characteristics that they introduced into the world of art, light and color. And instead of just creating a portrait and staying indoors, as artists did back in the early days of the Renaissance and so on, These artists like to pick up their canvas and go outside and do paintings of outdoors and nature. As you look at the colors here, this artist also does something called visual blending. So what he does is, if you would take a paintbrush and you dip a little bit of red on one side and a little bit of yellow on the other side, you take your brush, dab it on your canvas or on your paper. In this case, Robert Dono used canvas. Dab it on, and then what you do is your eyes visually blend those two colors, the red and the yellow, and as you stand back and you look, they blend together to make a color called orange. So a primary of red and a primary of yellow mixed together make a secondary color of orange. This painting, when you look at it up close, you can't touch a work of art, but as you look at it up close, it's very, very textural. Have you ever done a painting where you create a whole lot of texture in that? Have you ever done a painting of a seascape, or in this case, a landscape? Perhaps you can do that one day, and try some visual blending on your own. Okay, we're going to look now at another portrait of American Impressionism. So let's take a look at another impressionistic artwork. This, in contrast, is a portrait. I would ask you this. So here's a portrait of Mrs. Knowles and her two sons. It's titled Mrs. Knowles and Her Children. Do you know what the difference is between a portrait and a self-portrait? Think about that. I'll bet you do. As we look at this painting, you see Mrs. Knowles in the foreground. She's reading a book to her children. Notice the difference in personalities of these two boys. Perhaps you can chat about that a little later. But here's the book on her lap, and Mrs. Knowles looks like she had been reading, and she all of a sudden just glanced up to take a look at the viewer. As you move through this room, her eyes will follow you. Not that her eyes are actually moving, but just the positioning that the artist created suggests that. The artist of this painting is John Singer Sargent. John Singer Sargent loved to paint portraits of wealthy people. I think if you look at this painting, you can see the depiction of the glamour and the beauty from the background, which is what is furthest behind you, to the foreground, what we mean with the objects that are closest. In this case, the foreground consists of this little toy in the very bottom right of the painting, perhaps belonging to one of her two sons. And in the foreground also is Mrs. Knowles and her son. This painting was done in 1902 and is also an oil painting on canvas. Let's go on to another gallery. We're currently in the sports gallery. Every painting and sculpture within this collection depicts something relating to the world of sports. I know you'll enjoy going through and looking at all of the works, but right now I'd like to talk about this oil painting created by a gentleman named Clyde Singer. Clyde Singer actually was born and raised right outside of Cleveland in a town called Malvern, Ohio. He actually worked here at the Butler Institute of American Art for about 50 years. So this is a scene, the painting is called Minor League, and it's a scene of a baseball game that actually took place in the 1940s in Youngstown, Ohio. This baseball game is being played at a place called Idora Park. In Youngstown, we used to have an amusement park, you might be surprised to know, and it was visited by people from all over the state and states from far beyond. It is no longer here, but this was a ball field that was right in Idora Park. So in this game, you have this team called the Youngstown Gremlins that were a minor league team as a feed-in to the St. Louis Cardinals. And oftentimes artists will put themselves in a painting. In this case, Clyde Singer did. You will see him seated in a blue jacket in the second row, and right below him is his wife. So an actual ball game right in Youngstown, and you can see the background. If you look really closely and look at in the distance in the background, you see some boys up here in the tree. Apparently they couldn't get into the game. Maybe they couldn't get tickets, but you see them standing up in the tree and watching the ball game. Look at the expression on the people's faces in the foreground and as you look back into the distance. Another work of art called Minor League within our sports gallery. So now we've moved on to art that was created in the mid-20th century. And I call to your attention this fabulous painting by an American artist named Norman Rockwell. This painting of Lincoln the Rail Splitter was actually done in 1964. The Butler is very fortunate to have this painting because it actually belonged to a gentleman named Ross Perot. You may have heard that name, but he was running for president a while ago. Did not win, but this was in his collection and he actually put it up for auction. And the Butler is not funded by anything but private donations. So we are a nonprofit, and through the generosity of our community and the community at large, we actually are able to have these paintings or gifts. So this painting was purchased by members of our trustee circle as well as generous donors in the community to represent American art at its finest. Actually, back in the day, Norman Rockwell was not considered to be a fine artist. He was looked at as an illustrator. You would see images that he had created on covers of lots of magazines. And in those days, people did not consider someone that was an illustrator as an actual fine artist. Thank goodness times have changed. And Norman Rockwell is among one of the most respected artists in America. If you look at the painting, there's a couple things I'd like to bring to your attention. First of all, as you can tell, it is over 6 feet tall. But it's interesting, we had some little children that were preschool in one day, and they looked at this painting and they loved it. And they thought, wow, one of the boys asked a question, how is it that he ever could fit in that log cabin house in the background? That's something that the artist Norman Rockwell has done, showing the use of perspective. You see the figure, again I'm talking about the foreground, very large in the foreground of Norman Rockwell. In the background, notice in the distance the line of trees, and then the pasture and nature and the little tiny log cabin in the distance. If you even look closely, you can see the smoke coming out of the smokestack. But look at the features of Norman Rockwell, his face, the strength that you see in his hand and his arm that he created in Abe Lincoln. And we all heard the story that Abraham Lincoln loved to read, and you know he went on to become our 16th president. But take a look closely at his features and the strength that's created through that painting. We're going to go on to another gallery. So we're currently in Beecher Center. Back in 2000, the Butler Institute of American Art was among the 2 museums in the whole entire country to house a wing that was specifically dedicated to technology and new media. So within this section of our museum called Beecher Center, we have a very, very large sculpture that was created by an American artist. She is still living today. She lives in New York City, and her name is Audrey Flack. But this is a model, it's made out of plaster, of Queen Catherine. And this actually was supposed to be bronzed and placed on the East River, on the Queens side of the East River. So things evolved through time, changes took place, that never transpired, and Audrey Flack knows the executive director of our museum, Dr. Zona. She reached out to him and said, I have a wonderful piece, would you be interested? And we now are the proud owners of this Queen Catherine sculpture created in plaster by Audrey Flack. So let's go on and take a look at some other works. So right now we're looking at a work of art that is an abstract. Actually, the works that you've looked at previously were realistic works of art. Perhaps you can look up the difference between an abstract work of art and a realistic work of art. And you can even look up the difference between a sculpture and a painting. I know I talked a little bit about it, but you might like to do a little more research. So this is a painting done by an artist named Julian Stanczak. He was born in 1928 and he actually just passed away in 2020. One thing that's really unique about this is Julian Stanczak painted this between 1990 and 1991, and it consists of a kind of paint called acrylic paint. So different from the paints that were used previously, they were oil paints. So this abstract is an optical illusion. And artists call this kind of work op art, O-P, op art. So if you stand back and you squint your eyes at it really far, you almost feel like those colors move. And sometimes it's like, whoa, you just look and say, wow, that really hurts my eyes. But Julian Stanczak did something else with the use of color, and he used complementary colors. You see the use of green, and you see a little bit of red. Some of the red going horizontally, some of the red lines going vertically, as well as the different values of greens in the painting in the background. So that creates this optical illusion. So I think we'll end up our tour right here, and I'd like to share with you a little bit about your next trip to the Butler Institute of American Art. Hopefully you'll be back again, and I'll be happy to take you through and show you some other works of art. But also what I'd like to say is this. So as you think about your visit today to the Butler Institute of American Art, maybe you'd like to write a little reflection, a short paragraph, just a few sentences. What was your favorite work of art? Do you like paintings better than sculptures? Was there one painting you liked better than one sculpture? Or did you like, as my granddaughter would say, every single thing? If you did, maybe you can write a little bit about each. So my son is an artist as well. He's actually an Eagle Scout, which our family is very proud of. And he is an amazing artist. He's a realist. My husband was an artist. My husband was an abstract artist. So as you think about your trip today, reflect on some of the special pieces that you enjoyed as you visited America's Museum, the Butler Institute of American Art. Thanks for coming, and we hope to see you again real soon.